Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream instant reaction podcast. Rob Staten, Adam Nathan, Robbie Williams here. And fellas, I have come up with a new slogan for Seahawks fans to say when the defense is playing. Are you ready for this? The new slogan is, let's hide. Let's hide. Because frankly, watching this defense is terrifying right now. I just want to get straight into the defensive performance because we are now 5 weeks into the NFL season for 2022. And this is a woeful, embarrassing unit. It's a tragic unit, this defense. And, you know, I can already see in the comments, people are talking about the refs. And, you know, frankly, we can talk a bit about that, but I don't have any real hunger to talk about that, guys. I don't know about you. I don't really have any hunger to talk about the clear positives that there were on offense, and there were positives on the offense. If the defense continues to play this badly, there's only one topic in town. It's this. It's just how bad is this? Let's just remind ourselves of what New Orleans had their situation today. They had their backup quarterback playing. Neither Jarvis Landry or Michael Thomas were able to start the game. And Chris Olave went off injured with a concussion in the game. So they had none of their top receivers. Their quarterback wasn't playing. They had injuries on the offensive line. And they put up I think it was over 400 yards, wasn't it? They were something like 8 of 14 on third down. They had 235 rushing yards. And that play at the end of the game where you're defending a 1-point lead and they don't have a single receiver on the field and Taysom Hill in the backfield. And you know he's running the ball. You know it's a short yardage situation. You know what's coming. Everybody knows what's coming with him in the backfield. All you've got to do is be disciplined, pick your gaps, and make a stop and contain. And even if he gets the first down, just don't let him run for 60 flipping yards for God's sake and get a touchdown and ultimately win the game for New Orleans. It's embarrassing. They're playing without a pass rush. There is no pass rush on this team at all. They have no idea how to create consistent pressure. The linebackers are an abomination. They are just horrendous. The defensive backs got some youth in there and people are clutching onto that. I've seen it on Twitter. People are just saying, just give them time. They're young. They aren't young. They have experience and high picks at every level of this defense. Yes, there's going to be growing pains with a Tariq Woolen or a Kobe Bryant and people like that. I get that. But they've got Quandre Diggs at the back. What's he doing to justify his big contract? They have experience and high picks at every level of this defense. It cannot be this shambolic, fellas. Robbie, what was your take on the loss to New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, overall, super frustrating. I mean, I think you kind of hit all the points, you know, right there. I mean, the linebackers, the safeties are just playing out of position. Doesn't feel like we're getting much pressure up front. I think, you know, Al Woods again, but he's 36. I mean, he's the only one on the defensive line that seemed like he was playing well today. I am encouraged by the corners and the fact that they seem to be, you know, they're growing on the job and seem to be playing well, but there's too many holes on this defense. It's very frustrating to watch them play and not stop Taysom Hill. And the tackling is just unbearable. How are they not wrapping up? I mean, it's 5 weeks of this. How have they not dialed this in by now? Like, you can give them a pass maybe for the first week or two, but I mean, after that, it's getting to the point where it's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. And you know, you want to talk about like some of the positives, like there are positives on the offensive side of the ball, but this has just been horrendous.
You can't talk when you score 103 points in 3 games and you lose 2 of them and almost lose the one last week as well. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And I'm seeing people making excuses. I've had so many tweets. This one guy sent me a tweet saying they just haven't clicked yet. They will get there. But it's every year. This is the 4th year in the row where the defense has started terribly. And just give it time. They'll be okay. It's not good enough as an excuse anymore. You know, they look awful. They look like they don't know what they're doing. They look like a group of people who've never played the game of football before, thrown together. And yet, you know what? There's the odd flash. You know, Geno and Wosu will have a good play, or Al Woods will have a good play. But as a combined unit, what have they been working on in training camp? What have they been working on in practice this week? Why are the same problems happening? How does somebody not understand what to do with that Taysom Hill? I mean, Taysom Hill didn't just have one play, by the way. Every time he was on the field, it was like it's an automatic first down or a touchdown. Crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I've seen a super chat come in. Get them sent in. We're going to answer those questions if you sent a super chat in. But Adam, give us your take on this this performance we've seen today.
Yeah, I think this might be a recency bias, but obviously the defense has started badly for the last 3 or 4 years. And again, maybe I'm sort of twisting this to fit a tasty narrative, but at least in those few years, it felt like, well, they need to do this and this and this a bit better. And like, at least that's going okay. And that's all right. And then maybe they can be a decent defense. At the minute, they just don't look like they know what they're doing. They look, as organized and as prepared as they look on the offensive side of the ball, which is a huge surprise. They look that sort of level of unprepared and just not ready for the snap, for the plays. They're scrambling around. They just don't look comfortable. It gives you the heebie-jeebies like watching it. And if you don't feel confident watching them, I mean, God knows what they must feel like on there. It just doesn't feel like there's no cohesion. If you try and treat them as sort of a, if they're supposed to be a net sort of covering the field up and down, it just feels like these gaping holes all over the place and nothing seems to be working. But this seems like a top-down issue for me. Whereas in the past, it might have been, a player's not playing so well or that position group isn't great. This seems like, much more of a macro issue on the defense than the micro issues that were plaguing them that they managed to tweak. I think it'll be a heck of a job for them to tweak this into sort of a top 15 defense as they have done in the last few years.
Yeah, and the other thing is that they have played the easiest part of their schedule. Coming up, you've got 2 games against Arizona. Okay, Arizona are not playing particularly well, but they've still got explosive weapons. There's still an offensive-minded head coach there. They've got to play the Chargers and Justin Herbert around the corner. I've just watched the Giants beat the Packers. I mean, I've come straight through the front door. I've driven back I've still got my pass on from the game. I'm just coming straight back in to do this live stream to talk about the Seahawks. The Giants look really effective and just sort of manage all 3 facets of the game, which is what the Seahawks are supposed to be doing particularly well, and beat the Packers and Aaron Rodgers today. And then they've got things like the Chiefs coming up down the road and stuff like that. They're not going to get to play Andy Dalton and New Orleans minus their 3 receivers every week. They're not going to get to play Jared Goff. They're not going to get to play Atlanta. Atlanta had some good pieces. But there's still Marcus Mariota. They don't get to play Jimmy Garoppolo and a bit of Trey Lance. They don't get to play Russell Wilson as Russell Wilson is playing at the start of this year right now. Okay, they're going to get tougher down the line, and for the defense to be this bad now is just really, really concerning. There was a tweet here. Let me find it from Chad Davis, who is the sports editor at the Daily Herald in Everett, and I agree with everything that he said in this tweet. He says, "I'm tired of hearing the Seahawks defense will get better. I'm tired of in-house coordinator hires. I'm tired of baffled Pete Carroll face. Something needs to change." And I agree with all of those points. It's just that, Pete can come out and after the game, and I listened to the press conference in the car as after I'd watched the game. And, quite frankly, I can do without questions about how good is Tyler Lockett. I can do without questions about how was that a holding call. I mean, I thought, frankly, people are already seeing it in the comment section as saying the refs cost them the game. Oh, come on, guys. The DK Metcalf one was not a fumble. I mean, it was either an incomplete pass or his arm was down. So that was a complete, and they reviewed it, and I have no idea how they said the call stands on that one. That was ridiculous. I thought that the Olave touchdown was a touchdown. I thought he made a football move and caught that. I have no issue with that. I thought that even if I personally would not have flagged the Charles Cross hold, I can see why they called the Charles Cross hold, because he's got his arm on his shoulder and he kind of pulls him back a little bit. So I'm sorry, that's not why you lost the game. The reason you lost the game is because Taysom Hill ran for 60 yards on 3rd and short when you were defending a 1-point lead. The reason you lost the game is you had no answer for Taysom Hill every single time he was on the field. The reason you lost the game is because you gave up 235 rushing yards against an offense that had to run the ball. I mean, I came into this game thinking, do you know what's going to be the real acid test for this team is how they're going to handle Cam Jordan on offense. How are they going to... I watched the Saints against the Vikings. I wasn't at the game, but I watched the London game last week. And they were all over Minnesota. That D-line was fantastic. They smothered Minnesota. Seattle's offense put 30-odd points on the board. They had no issue with that. That wasn't the problem at all. The defense just had to hold its end of the bargain against a backup quarterback and basically backups at receiver and a really sort of tepid-looking Saints personnel group on offense. And they shat the bed. I mean, it was awful. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough. And Carroll said after the game, after he'd answered all the questions about injuries and how good was Tyler Lockett and how good's Tariq Woolen and all of that, he had a couple. He says, please let me watch the film first. Well, tomorrow I want to see some questions asked about this defense, and I want some proper questions and I want some proper answers, because this is not good enough. It has to be better than this, and there's no excuses. They're not young. They have expensive players on this unit. I mean, let me just bring it up here. I've got all of the cap hits from this year. So you've got Poona Ford is your highest paid player, biggest cap hit on the team this year, defender. Uchenna Nwosu's 5th. Quandre Diggs is 6th. Shelby Harris is 8th. You've got players there who are, your Quinton Jefferson's on a decent amount. Al Woods is on a decent amount. Jordan Brooks is a 1st-round pick. Darrell Taylor's a 2nd-round pick. You've just paid Brian Monet. Boya Mafe was a high 2nd-round pick. You've got players. Cody Barton's been there a long time. You've got experienced players that you would expect to be performing better than this. It's not good enough. Sniper Hero sent in a message. Is this the worst Seattle defense of the Pete Carroll era? Is it even close? At least Tariq and Kobe look good. Tough game. Feel bad for Penny. Yeah, Rashad Penny looks like he's out for the season with a broken leg. And that's part of the problem as well. Do you know, I'd love nothing more than to sit here, fellas, and say, wow, Tariq Woolen, 3 interceptions in 3 games. That's fantastic. But what's the point of burying the lead? We can all sit here, just nod if you agree that Tariq Woolen's playing well. Yeah, okay. Now let's talk about the serious things, Robbie, because it's just, what do you think is a reasonable solution to this? Because frankly, I look at this in the bigger picture and think, the people running this, so you have a defensive-minded head coach who can't put a defense together and hasn't for a long time. Why should we feel that he's the answer to take this team forward beyond this year? Or even if you're going to give Carroll a pass, why is Clint Hurt the right defensive coordinator? Why is John Schneider the right GM? Because he's helped build this defense. What's going on? Like, how can there be any defense of the people responsible for putting this product on the field today?
Yeah, I mean, I think both you and Adam just kind of said it. It starts top down with Pete and worse than there, and John Snyder as well. And I had high expectations for Clint Hurt. I mean, like during the offseason, he said all the right things. I was excited to see these multiple blitz packages, and it just doesn't seem like, I mean, apart from maybe a couple times where Kobe Bryant blitzed, I'm not seeing much that's even a positive out of this new defense. I mean, I would almost rather they go back to the old defense that they're playing last year. At least Darrell Taylor might look like he's doing something, and he seems completely lost right now. And this whole team is just it's very confusing watching them play. And I want to rave about some of these positive things, but it's just so hard with the negative things that are going on. And it starts at the top down. There needs to be some serious questions answered. This offseason, because what's going to happen, we're in a position where we're going to have what looks like ultimately probably going to be 2 fairly high 1st-round draft picks, right? The Broncos don't seem to be playing very well. We should be in a position to draft some studs. I mean, and you said it last week, Rob, there's no stud. I mean, apart from Will Anderson, there's nothing that's coming down the pipeline in the draft that's like going to be that sort of game-wrecking defensive players. And we need people to rally around right now. Maybe some of these younger guys will take into that leadership role and kind of get guys to rally around them next season. But I mean, we have some serious holes to fix, and I think at the very least, it starts with the coaching staff.
Adam?
Yeah, I mean, in trying to give a good account of myself when I'm on this show, and one day it'll happen, I promise. Like beforehand, I try and think, well, if Seattle win, what might we like to touch upon? And if we lose, what might I like to think, to talk about? And I said to myself this morning, if they lose, let's try and not go too heavy, me personally, on the Pete Carroll stuff. Like, no one needs a referendum on the Pete and John thing every week after a loss. I'm aware that people don't necessarily like to hear it and they think it's boring, whatever. But watching how they play today, it seems quite hard to ignore that. Because, I watched that team play today, and for me, they look like they're hurtling towards a situation of just being fine. I said on our show this week that there's no like holes in the team necessarily, because there's people filling them all, but it's just a lot of fine. You know, Geno Smith might be the quarterback next year, because if Pete Carroll's the head coach, it wouldn't stun you if you thought, well, you know, he's fine and he's doing a good job. He's fine. And, you know, Jordan Brooks is fine. And Darryl Taylor, well, he's fine. And how can you upgrade on that? And I think my worry at the moment, watching the whole organization, is that we have the summer of a lifetime, or the off season of a lifetime coming up. It really has to be this off season where everything changes. You know, not necessarily demanding results in 2023, but the framework for the next championship team has to be in place at the end of this off season, because that's really where all your chips are. And I just worry that from the top down, everything is just fine. And fine gets you 7-10 or 8-9, 9-8, Kirk Cousins, Minnesota Vikings. And that's not really where we want to be. And I don't think it's unfair to demand championship aspirations. And look, it looks like the Wilson trade turned into a half decent move given how he's played. So, you know, fair play to them for that. That was a big call and they've got it right. But when you watch the team play like that, although I don't want to bring it up every time we're on after a loss, because it just feels like we're, you know, shoving a narrative somewhere. It's hard because we want this team to be a champion, and they just feel a long way off it. You know, they're not bad enough to be rip it up and start again, but they'd look miles off being good enough when you compare it to the Buffaloes of this world. And let's be honest, this is a mediocre NFC, bang average NFC, and they're not really going to make the playoffs out of that. So I don't know. I'm quite deflated for the long term, which is how I'm trying to frame the whole season at the moment off the back of that game. Sorry for the long answer.
No, absolutely no issue with that. The length of the answer, all the points you made, I think you raised some very good points. And I think that you've made me think a little bit about it as well, because I don't, listen, it may seem that way. I mean, I guess if you just join in for these chats after the game, you may well think that some kind of agenda, you know, that we want to get rid of Pete Carroll. I will accept that accusation. I really have not. Like, if nothing would have pleased me more tonight than to come in and go, wow, that defense looked a lot better and fair play. And I must admit, there was earlier in the game, I was kind of thinking, oh, this is a bit better this week. You know, that's good. Hopefully this continues. And I must admit, and I've said it numerous times, I'm not really invested in the games this year. They don't really have an emotional toll on me. But when Kenneth Walker ran that touchdown in, I got my hopes up a little bit. I was sat in the back of the car and I was thinking, oh, you know, great. You know, Ken Walker's had a big play. He's not really done anything yet. They spent this high pick on him. He's run it in. You know, I'm quite excited about it. Great explosive play. Geno Smith's played well. And I must admit, I was hoping for a win at that point. And if New Orleans had marched down the field and done something, and Alvin Kamara had done something amazing or something like that, yeah, whatever. It all helps towards draft position. But to lose it on that play, for it to be that kind of play, it pissed me off more than anything else could have pissed me off, because it was just so, you know, you see, okay, here we go, Taysom Hill. And as soon as he got through the line, you're thinking, oh, no, he's not, is he? No, he has. Yeah, he's got all the way into the end zone there. It's a 60-yard touchdown for a gimmick quarterback. Look, I'm not trying to do Taysom Hill down. He's had a good game today. He's been an effective player doing what he did today in a number of games. But I can't remember him scoring many 60-yard touchdowns running away from a defense, from in his own half. And he did that today. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It has to be better. And the whole point of this season is to get you sort of okay at the end, with the idea that we're somewhat heading in the right direction. We're heading in the right direction. I can't watch this defense for whatever it's going to be, 5, 6, 7, 8, half a season, whatever it is, and then make a mild improvement later on and go, okay, that's fine. Because all my thought will be now is, and next year we'll start the season with exactly the same thing again that we've had the previous 4 years, which is a terrible start on defense, and we'll be having to work all the way through the year to get to a level which is acceptable. And by that point, it'll be too late. It's too late now. It's gone. You know, a couple of weeks is too much. You have to be showing signs of progress and improvement. And this is just so bad. It's just bad across the board. Their run defense, their lack of pass rush, the missed tackles, the continued awful performance of certain players, the complete non-existence of Darrell Taylor, who was supposed to be taking a big step. You've nobody up front. You're paying a lot of money for that interior line. What do? After the impact games, Al Woods had a sack. Well done. Nobody else did anything. They're paying Quandre Diggs. Quandre Diggs' cap hit next year is $18 million. And Jamal Adams is $18 million. You're paying $36 million next year for these two safeties. Who feels comfortable with that? It's crazy. Like, there's nothing. What do they work on in training camp? What do they do? Like, how does it end up like this every single year? And going back to Chad's tweet earlier, just seeing Pete Carroll looking a bit confused on the sideline and now joined by Clint Hurt looking a bit confused as well, ain't cutting it. And we've just got to get better. We've just got to get better. Talking press conference, it isn't cutting it and it's winding me up. And fans deserve for the Seattle media to go to Pete Carroll tomorrow and challenge him and push him and probe him and pick up on his answers and say, how are you going to fix this? And why has this happened for 4 years in a row that the defense has been poor? I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, Robbie, but it has to stop. I don't want to listen to Brock and Salt tomorrow and have 25 minutes of referee talk and Tyler Lockett talk and 5 minutes of, hey, that defense though, that was a bit of a struggle, wasn't it there, Pete? And then wait till the KJ Wright conversation so KJ Wright can say what we're all thinking on Wednesday. It has to be tomorrow that Pete Carroll is pushed and probed. And if they have to drop him a text and say, just so you know, a lot of defensive talk tomorrow, so just prepare you for that, and so be it. But that has to happen. There has to be that conversation now, Robert.
Yeah, I agree. And my apologies earlier, my internet dropped for a second. But yeah, I don't think, again, that we're going to see a lot of credibility come from Pete on that. The last 4 years, like you said, we've seen the same thing over and over. And I just don't think we're going to, they're just not going to probe them on those kind of questions. And we deserve some better answers than what we've been getting. And it's weird to me that we have a defensive-minded head coach who put together one of the best defense of all time to be in this kind of position where we're just so poor. And I think we need some answers for it. I mean, I'd love to know what the plan is going forward to kind of fix this, and how do you right the ship, because it's really, really bad, and it's only going to get worse from here because the schedule gets a lot harder.
And Adam, before I bring you back in, can I just say I am actually really concerned, because I see things like this on Twitter. Like, someone's just sent me a tweet: both first rounders better be front seven, Rob. I'm seeing people saying we need to go and draft for defense now. And I don't think people really understand how dangerous that is. Because if you start chasing defensive improvement next year and your Wilson haul becomes an attempt to paper over the cracks of this defense in what I've spent so much time, trust me, please trust me when I say this, I've spent far too much time this week watching college football tape. I have an article coming, which I've had to split into two. It's too long. And I thought, well, why have one big article when you can have two? It's a good sort of time-saving measure, that, of players who are not quarterbacks who I want to write about. I cannot find first-round defensive players. There's a couple in there who you could justify taking later on. They're not game wreckers. They're not going to evolve this defense into something that we all want it to be. That's not there. Drafting defense and saying, do you know what? Geno Smith's actually all right. Geno Smith's 32 tomorrow. He is not the future. He's the present. And guess what? Geno Smith's not under contract next year. So one, you might not be able to re-sign him. And two, what if Geno Smith, not unfairly, says, give me $25 million. Give me $30 million. That's a fraction of Russell Wilson's salary. It'd be $20 million less than Russell Wilson's salary if you ask for $30 million. Are you going to pay Geno Smith $30 million for next year? Are you going to franchise Geno Smith and not have any money to spend? So you can go on. Is that how you want this to go? That you want to draft for defense and do all that? Or do you want to stick to the plan? But it's the worst of both worlds, isn't it? Because the plan should have been, and was presumably, the defense will be different and new and trending in the right direction with your young players, your Brooks, your Taylors, your Maffeys, your Nwosus, your two expensive safeties, your draft picks at cornerback, that the defense trends up. and that the offense is okay for this year, but ultimately what you're going to do is go and get your quarterback next year. And what people are starting to say now is, oh, forget the quarterback. We need defense. Geno's the man. That scares the crap out of me, Adam, because I can appreciate and accept that Geno Smith is playing 100,000 times better than I ever thought he would. But he ain't the answer at quarterback. And the answer next year is not to just pump everything into the defense and hope that that fixes things, because that to me will just mean more of the same next year.
Yeah, I have probably a fairly reductive view that if 2, 3, 4 players in a team aren't playing particularly well on any given day, it's quite likely that's on the players. But when it's 9, 10, 11, there's something bigger going on than that. Oh, there's Rob. Yeah, if 9, 10, or 11 of you aren't playing well, then that's likely a bigger thing than the individual players. And I don't think they're bad players on defense. I think you could easily sort of close one eye, squint with another, and pick 11 players out there that should easily be a serviceable defense. If the offense is scoring 30 points a game, that keeps you well in the majority of games. And yeah, as you say, if there aren't the game wreckers, just to overpay for more defense because you think that's what you need because the offense is fine, I do think would be a grave mistake. But again, then we sort of get back to, well, Pete Carroll has to look at himself and say, what can I do better? And he's not going to do that because he never has and he never will. You know, you got Tater as the accountability merchant in the building, and that's just where we are with Pete Carroll. So it's going to be really frustrating to end this season without clarity, because I think all of us wanted to go into this year and thought, look, if we don't win, that's fine. But what I'd like to know at the end of the year is, where are we heading? What do we need? We need this, this, and this. That, and that's going to improve. But it just feels quite muddled at the minute, doesn't it? It just feels a little bit like you could, Rob, you can write 10,000 words probably on a car journey back from London with your eyes closed. At the minute, it feels like you could write some on the linebackers. You could write one on the safeties. You could write on the pass rush. You could write on the run defense. You could write on, are you even a real team if you give up 4 total touchdowns to Taysom Hill in a game? Like, that's farcical. There just feel so many areas in which require work that I worry that going into the off-season of all off-seasons, there's almost going to be too much to do to feel confident going into the season. That is a concern to me.
I just want to see little steps, increment steps, and towards a greater goal of contention. And it doesn't have to be that you're contending in 2023. I don't think it should be. You are contending in 2023 or else. But I think by the end of 2023, you should be thinking we're an off season away from being in position to really go for it. And I look, I've studied so much. I've never done as much work on a draft. Dating, I've watched every game from last season of all the top quarterbacks, and I've watched all of their games this year. I couldn't have done any more. I'm telling everybody, basically, there is, and I was talking to somebody else. I was in the press room today, speaking to somebody who equally is a bit of an obsessive about the draft and college football. And I said, what are you seeing? He says, I can't find any top 15 players. And I was like, I'm exactly the same. You've basically got Will Anderson, 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and then like it's just a massive shrug of the shoulders. And going and chasing the defense and papering over that is simply not going to be the answer. There has to be some greater control, and that means that you have to ask the questions about, if you are going to go in this direction, you're going to draft a quarterback, and if you're going to have to try and get a bit more out of this defense moving forward, who's the best person to run it? Who's the best person to be at the forefront of all of this? And I think those have to be valid questions. And coming back to the point that you made, Adam, I don't want this to be a weekly fire Pete Carroll conversation every time that there's a loss. I really don't. I'm begging to give him the benefit of the doubt and sort of have some faith. It would be much easier because I don't think he is going to. I was going to say I don't think he's going to go, but I don't know, because if they lose the next 6-7 games and the defense continues like this, he might retire or they might get rid of him. I don't know. Who knows? I don't like speaking in absolutes, and I think too many do about Pete Carroll's future. So I don't want to talk that way, but I want to be able to think he probably isn't going anywhere. And yeah, okay, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he isn't going anywhere, and I want my team to succeed and I want us to win. And right now, I just cannot I just can't see it. And we need to see more. We need to see so much more from this defense in every single level. And right now, you could look at it and say the whole defensive front needs a rebuild. They need to get rid of Cody Barton and Jordan Brooks because they're not good enough. You need to find a way to turn the page on Diggs and Adams because the one's injured and the other's, I don't know what he's doing. Is the rest of the defense bringing him down? Maybe. You've basically got Tariq Woolen, maybe Kobe Bryant. It's such a sorry state of affairs. And it's just hard, Robbie. It's just really hard to sort of know where do they go from here? Because I think the way that some fans are talking, it is we're really in danger of just becoming one of those teams who are kind of like stuck in the, the lower third of the NFL for a long, long time because you've got no purpose. You either need to have the defense and go and get the quarterback. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, Robbie. It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people commenting here, like well, what'd you guys expect? We're in a rebuild. You expect us to be really good or whatever, but that's not what was said. Listen, Pete Carroll said at the beginning of the season that this wasn't a rebuild, it was a retool, and we were all hoping that we would be just a quarterback away, that we would build the foundation of players, and that all we'd have to do is plug in a good quarterback. And it turns out, actually, Geno Smith has been pretty good, and it's the defense that's been terrible. That was, I think, for us. I think that's unexpected, right? We were expecting we had higher expectations of the defense, especially all the things that were said. And I think this is one of the reasons why, as fans, we deserve a better answer from Pete. All the scheme change and everything. I think we need to, at this point, make a change and really do something that's going to put our situation, put our defense in a better situation that they are in right now, because it's absolutely crap right now. And I think as fans, we just want a better answer. And I think that's all we're looking for, right? I mean, especially when you say this isn't a rebuild. Well, it's looking like a more rebuild now, right, than it was when we started the offseason.
Somebody said to me on Twitter earlier that everybody in Seattle expected this on defense. I cannot believe that for a second. I expected some growing pains. I didn't expect to see this, Adam. This goes beyond growing pains, doesn't it? That Taysom Hill run goes beyond growing pains. The consistent horrendous play on defense goes beyond growing pains. This is not a young, and people mistake this as a young defense. It's not a young defense, and it's coached, organized, led, executed abysmally, and we're seeing players regress rather than develop. The players we expected to see a step forward are regressing. Your Poona Ford's regressed because the scheme doesn't fit him. Al Woods isn't grading as well as he has in the past. Shelby Harris isn't grading as well as he has in the past. Brian Monet's not grading as well as he has in the past. Jordan Brooks isn't fitting. Cody Barton's an absolute horror story. Quandre Diggs is grades down. Awful.
Yeah, I mean, we on our show last week we had Michael Sean on, and we were talking about. I mentioned this comparison between this season being like 2011, and he actually stopped me and said, well, going into 2011, Pete declared that he wanted to win a championship. He just made the playoffs, and
Pete says that every year.
Well, but I know he does, but I think the point was he was saying that people look at 2011 as the rebuild year because by the end of it, it wasn't a great season and they showed a few flashes, but the intention going into the season was to win the championship. And I think it is worth pointing out that it's only the fans that are talking about a rebuild this year. Like, maybe Pete is being flippant, but he was very clear that this was not a retool. This isn't a rebuild. They want to go and win championships and win playoff games this year. And obviously, I'm maybe being slightly flippant in my point, but I'm basically trying to say, do you think this should alter our views even further to the point that Pete hasn't even given himself the leeway of, well, look, there's going to be some growing pains here because we're trying to do something on the fly. For him, he went into this season thinking we can win the championship. And for me, that makes giving up a run to Taysom Hill like that seem all the more damning, to be honest.
I don't agree. I listened to your podcast and I didn't agree with the point when I heard it with Michael Sean Dugar. I remember 2011 very, very well, and because it was the lockdown year and the season there was a draft, there was no free agency. There was free agency right before the season began. Tavares Jackson was the flipping quarterback. Everybody's view on that year was take a step forward. You've had this sort of interesting 7-9 season. You had Beastquake, you won a playoff game, you got beaten badly by Chicago. Take a step forward. Take a step forward, because we all know the quarterback was not going to be found in that draft. They didn't draft a quarterback. They chose not to draft Andy Dalton. They sort of pushed that down the line. We knew that was a conversation that was coming up. You know, I spent the whole of the 2011 college football season studying quarterbacks and stuff like that. We were talking about the Matt Barclays. We were talking about Jake Locker. We were talking Cam Newton. We were talking about all of Blaine Gabbert. We were talking about all of those players. It was all about setting the table for the inevitability of drafting a quarterback. And by the end of the 2011 season, you got Marshawn running like his hair was on fire, and you had the LOB was being formed with Browner and Earl and Cam, and Richard Sherman was emerging, and you had drafted KJ Wright. So the foundation was there, and Pete in his final press conference in 2011 said, we need, obviously the quarterback situation needs to be reviewed, and I think he spoke very positive about Tavares Jackson, but everybody knew. And then the other thing he said was that we need speed in the front seven, at linebacker and pass rush, and they badly needed pass rusher. So they got Bruce Irvin, they got Bobby Wagner, and they got Russell Wilson, and they signed Matt Flynn. And you could go into 2012 thinking this team is ready to sort of just take a step forward. Even then, I don't think people in 2012 were thinking Super Bowl season. They weren't. It was everyone got caught up in the Wilson stuff, which is obviously amazing. It was a great ride to be on. And they kind of started so, but it kind of even then felt like a snowball was building down the hill. It wasn't, they're ready. And nobody thought, I mean, Pete says it's a bloody championship year every year. And he definitely said it. He definitely said it in the context of Pete will always say that. And I don't think anybody really believed it. So yeah, that's I think the useful thing about 2011 as some form of a comparison, because I think you all agreed that it was lazy on the podcast. I don't think it's lazy. I just think it's an interesting comparison, because you had year one, which was 2010. You then had year two, and you could see the green shoots building as you went along. And that's what I wanted this year, was to see the green shoots coming along. And it's just useful to sort of make some comparison. Nobody expects Marshawn. No one expects LOB. Nobody expects all of that. It's just useful in that regard, I think, anyway. And from what we're seeing, they are a lot better at quarterback than they were in 2011, and a lot worse on defense so far. A lot worse. Robbie? Oh, Matt, Adam, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, you'd come back to me. No, that's perfectly fair. And there's a comment that's on the thread on the right saying, well, what do you expect Pete to say? You know, we're going to be rubbish, get your popcorn. But it doesn't need to be that binary. I don't think fans would have an issue with the head coach saying, look, we traded the quarterback. History would suggest that you're not going to necessarily, there's the comment, thank you. You're not necessarily going to be a winning team straight off the bat. Might take a bit of patience, but we are building something to solidify this franchise for the future and for the long term. I don't think anyone would have any issues if the coach said that. I think people have more of an issue with him saying, oh, no, don't worry about it. Like this, we're going to win a championship. Well, you've not done that for 10 years, and you're getting worse, really, from a player perspective. So you're asking an awful lot of faith from the fan base to trust you on that. And I think I do get a bit frustrated when people treat it as such a binary thing of, we're going to be the best team in the world, we're going to be the worst team in the world. There's obviously a middle ground that the majority of certainly younger coaches are easily able to find when they speak to the media and the fans.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. I think that what you've kind of got at the minute are, the people who are minded to defend the team or feel that they are under attack personally because people are criticizing. I mean, here's the thing, right? And I do tend to think it comes from one side on this. We're all Seahawks fans. Adam and I live in the United Kingdom. We will stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning watching the Seahawks. I've watched the Seahawks on a drive home. I've come through the door and just sat right to talk about the Seahawks. I don't do that because I want the Seahawks to lose. Honestly, if I said 10 negative points going into the season, all 10 were proven wrong and the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, I'd be absolutely delighted. On a personal level, because I'm a massive Seahawks fan. I mean, I live and breathe Seahawks football. And the other reason is just that the blog just does so much better when the team is succeeding. And it's easier for me. It's easier to cover a team that is succeeding. But I also think it's harder to have the willingness to sort of challenge some important topics and not just to sort of skirt around them, as so many other podcasts and streams and articles do, just going to skirt around the issues to not be seen to be too negative. I think what we do is we just get straight into it. We just get into what are the issues that we need to talk about. And I think that's fine. And people are going to defend the team, but ultimately we're all Seahawks fans here. And you don't have to try too hard. And I think when we talk about what does Pete Carroll say and how Pete Carroll acts, and I think he could have tempered his language a little better going into this season. And I think he could offer us a bit more on and fronts up a little bit more on the defense right now. That doesn't mean he has to come out and go, we are going to be awful this year. And it doesn't mean he has to necessarily come out now and go, we are awful on defense, I give up. It just has to be a bit more. Like you said, I think Curtis put a good point. There's nuance. There's like a middle ground that can be found here. And that's really the point on it. Robbie, do you want to chime in on anything that we're talking about in this particular strand?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are hitting, on the head right there. I mean, really, it's just, this is the language that's used, right? And this is kind of what the point I was making earlier, Pete coming out and saying, we're going to compete for a championship this year, and kind of like, our goal is to, win the NFC West. And it's great. That's all coach speak. But I think, realistically, I saw someone post in the chat, we traded away our franchise quarterback, which is 100%. It would have been better if he would have come out and said, anytime that happens, we're going to do our best to try to win some ball games. But obviously this is, we're kind of going into a retooling season, and this, the coach speak and making us kind of feel like we're not, intelligent human beings, and that he can just use his Pete speak and we're just going to listen. This is different. I think that's all it really is. And I think the point you said, Rob, is like, I see all these people arguing on the comment section, and we're all Seahawks fans. We all want them to win. We all want them to be competitive. We all want them to win every game. We want to win the Super Bowl. I think that's, ultimately what it comes down to. I think, we're just getting into the points where we find that we're frustrated about. And it's going to be a long season for us. Let's be honest. We kind of knew that going in. We kind of said like, hey, we win the Denver game and the 2 San Francisco games, we'll be happy with just that. And we've already seemed to be playing better. I mean, there are positives to take away, like especially, Geno's playing, looks like he's playing really good football. I mean, there's things that have surprised me, so I don't want to take anything away from that, but we're kind of getting into the topics that we want to talk about. And, I think that might frustrate some people and some fans on, that's not what they want to hear. And I get it. There's going to be, people who are going to back Pete no matter what, and they're going to back the team and just want to think all, sunshine and rainbows. I get it. But, this is kind of what we want to get into.
And look, King Mike's put another comment on in the live chat. And look, send super chats in, support the channel, help us out. Really, I want to stick to I don't want to dig too much into the comments, but King Mike has said something along the lines of, I think we're better than what a lot of people expected. I would agree. On offense, we are. And I'll hold my hands up. I did not expect Geno Smith to play at this level. And look, there are still the occasional flashes of Geno Smith being Geno Smith. I think there was a sack on 3rd and 2 or something, which, he dilly-dallied in the pocket. And it was a bit of a Russell Wilson sack in the end, wasn't it? The way that he took that one. There were a couple of moments like that I think happened. But, wow, some of the throws he's making are way beyond my expectations. He's attacking opponents. He's throwing on an intermediate level well. He's throwing on a deep level well. I think he's, it's not just check down Charlie stuff. He is playing very, very well. Surpassed all of my expectations. I'd give Geno Smith a fantastic round of applause, a standing ovation for the way that he's played. Cannot praise the guy enough. I think huge credit. I completely accept that I was wrong about my sort of expectations for him. I still would like to see how he's going to continue to fare as the season goes on. I also wonder a little bit if the defense continues to play as badly as this, if he will start to press a little bit more, because there's going to be games where the score maybe gets away from him a little bit and he's got to chase. And how is he going to handle in that situation? That's going to be interesting. But look, he's doing ever so well. I think DK Metcalf is the same player that he's always been, which is flashes of amazing and flashes of what are you doing, DK? I mean, he had a horrible drop, which should have been a touchdown, and a fumble, which shouldn't have been a fumble, but ultimately don't fumble it in the first place, and you never give anybody a chance to return it, or a chance to say it's a turnover. Tyler's amazing. The tight ends are being used well. Penny was looking strong. It's a real shame about his injury. Ken Walker comes in. Offense is great. They're miles better than most people think. Let's just be honest about the defense. It's worse than people thought. Nobody expected this. So it's a yin and a yang. The offense is better than expected. The defense isn't. And they're not. I mean, it's just everything, is it? They're not even physical, are they? They're not hitting anybody. They're not even doing that. They're not. If nothing else, you could say we're going to take away the run and give up something in the pass. And if that was just the problem, if they're giving up a lot of yards in the passing game, tighten up in the red zone, fine, you can live with that. If they're not particularly good against the run, but they're great in coverage and the pass rush is good, you can live with that. But to be terrible at everything and tackling and no hits and no physicality and there's no resistance whatsoever against even Andy Dalton and Taysom Hill, it's just so frustrating. And I know it's hard. It is for someone who watches all of the draft, like I've said before. I'd love to speak to somebody who would make the argument for drafting defense and get their thoughts on it, because I just can't see the players, guys. And whatever you think of this quarterback class, I'm telling you, this quarterback class is probably about as good as you're going to really find. There's not the Joe Burrow types don't come along very often. That's why I had a record-breaking unbeaten Heisman season and threw like 60 touchdowns. They don't happen. Those players aren't there. The Andrew Lucks are rare. Even Trevor Lawrence lost to the Houston Texans today. You don't, you can wait forever for a golden class. People are saying wait for the USC quarterback. Okay, well, you're going to be the worst team in 2023 to go and get him next in 18 months' time. I mean, it's just you can't plan for those kind of things. You have got 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the draft next year, and Will Anderson. And apart from that, it's horrendous. Like, even if Denver are so bad, which they might be, to give you a top 10 pick or top 12 pick, and you've got a top 12 pick, if you have 2 top 12 picks in the 8 and 10, I couldn't tell you right now what I think they should do with them other than trade up for quarterback or Will Anderson. I couldn't tell you what they should go for because those players aren't there, which is why I kind of think if you come out of it with a flipping quarterback, at least you've got that. At least you've got somebody who can say, this is the future. Even if Geno Smith is the present, this is the guy who's going to be the future. There isn't any outside of Will Anderson dynamic pass rushers. There's no linebackers like Luke Kuechly who are worth taking in the top 10. There's no Micah Parsons. There's no lockdown cornerback. There's no even a Derek Stingley type player in this draft. There's not even a Jamal Adams who you can justify taking very, very early. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. They're not there. Jalen Carter's a late first. Brian Bressee's probably mid to late first. All of the other pass rushers, throw the names. No. There's no linebacker. There's nobody. There's a whole bunch of receivers. None of them are playing well. Or they're injured. It's looking. This could be the worst draft class that I've covered in terms of high picks beyond the quarterbacks and Will Anderson. It's so bad. So bad. Which is why I will continue to bang the drum for make sure you come out of it with a Will Levis or a CJ Stroud, or if Bryce Young floats your boat, whatever. And I'd even be prepared to take a gamble on Anthony Richardson and have him sit for a year and try and learn because, frankly, there's nothing else. And I mean, how do you guys feel about that? If I'm right, how do you feel about that, Adam?
Bad year to have a load of first and second round picks is probably how I feel about it. I mean, you know this much more than me. 6 weeks in, 6 weeks in, has the framework of a draft always been established at this point? Or does it ever happen that, you get a load of players that just break out? You're shaking your head, so I'm going to presume it's a no.
By now, you have players emerging. I mean, there's a defender at Michigan who is emerging, and maybe come the end of the year, I think his name's Mike Morris. By the end of the year, he may well have worked himself into a first-round range. I have watched him. I would say that he is less exciting than David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson a year ago. So I'm personally not saying, "Ooh, there's the answer." And there's nobody. Like I made a list when Justin Herbert fell to number 5. I think it was the 5th overall pick or another 6th overall pick. And I made a list of all the sort of the players that went in that top 15 that year, and it was full of like big name defenders, receivers, offensive linemen, and you think, okay, if you'd have had a couple of top 12 picks there, you'd think, ooh, foundational draft coming up. With this, if you said to me right now, the Seahawks will use their first 2 picks to trade up and get a quarterback, I go, yeah, okay. That's fine. Because I don't really see the alternative. I don't, but spending the two of them on a quarterback could probably be better than spending the two of them on two players who aren't going to make a jot of difference. And I think that's what you might end up with.
The Seahawks technically have 4 first-round picks they could use in the next draft, given you've got 2023, 2024. If you listed sort of Stroud, Young, Richardson, and Levis, who appear to be the 4 trailblazers, in this draft, then let's say that the Broncos and Seattle both give you sort of low 10s. Let's say we end up with the 11th and the 15th round pick for the sake of it, which I don't think it's a million miles off where it will end up. Is there any of one of those 4 that's worth 4 or 3 or 2 picks out of those 4? If you've got 11 and 15,
I think you could make an argument for Levis and Stroud to use those 2 picks. I think you can make the argument for Will Anderson. Maybe Will Anderson's not playing as well this year as he did last year. I mean, last year was unstoppable. This year is not unstoppable. He's just playing fairly well. He's not Myles Garrett, I don't think, and he's not Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa. So it's whether or not you want to take the chance that he could end up being that. I mean, essentially, the draft. I mean, listen, there is one other thing that Pete might do if Pete's making the call, and and there's a whole strand of Seahawks fans who will shudder at the thought. But what is actually strong in this draft is flipping running back. And, you've got Bijan Robinson, who is going to get graded in the top 10 by pretty much every team. Whether he goes in the top 10 will depend on the position, but I suspect he probably will because the other players aren't there. He's going to go very, very early. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to go very, very early. Personally, I'd rather take Zach Charbonnet in round 3 if you are replacing Rashad Penny and just go down that road, or even look at, the Kentucky running back whose name is Chris Rodriguez, who basically runs hard, runs a little bit with the same intensity as Marshawn. I'd rather go that later on than do anything early, but it's Pete. And if Pete's got 2 first-round picks and he can't move up for a quarterback and he's looking at who's available and he sees Bijan Robinson there, I can't tell you that he ain't going to take him. And then imagine the meltdown next April if the first of the high picks post Russell Wilson is on another running back. But the other maybe they take Michael Mayer, another tight end. At least these are the guys that are in this draft. There's just, I'd love to sit here and go, oh, it's jam-packed with elite defensive linemen. It just isn't. There's not even a receiver that I can say, hey, a third receiver would be good, wouldn't it? Here's the next Jamar Chase. Here's the next Justin Jefferson. Here's the next whoever, Jalen Waddle. There's not even that player, guys. And it just, it feels a little bit bleak sat here tonight. I feel a bit more down in the dumps today than I've felt in a while, really, because the more and more I watch about the draft, the less excited I am about any non-quarterbacks, really. And even they have flaws. And the more I watch the team, I just want to, Robbie, I want to see some progress on defense. And it ain't there because I wanted it to be ideally the other way around. Defense grows, offense lacks the quarterback. You get the quarterback next year, you keep building on the defense, and you come back next year and you have a real bloody good go. Whereas it kind of feels like, well, they might end up not taking a quarterback now because Geno Smith's playing better than expected, but I think that'd be a mistake. Geno Smith might cost you an absolute fortune to keep next year, which I don't think people are realizing. And then you go and invest a load of picks in the defense and players that aren't good enough to actually elevate the defense.
Yeah, that's funny you say that you're a little down because somebody just texted me, a friend of mine, just said, "Man, you guys are bumming me out." And so I think that's.
and I'm really sorry. Listen, and this is not the intention. Our intention is not on mine. I can't speak for you two, but my intention is not to bum people out.
Yeah,
it's just to have an honest conversation.
No, I agree, and I think kind of just going back to what you're talking about, like with what to do with the picks, and if we're in that kind of situation, I think the only logical thing to do is to use those picks to get your guy, right? Go get the guy that you think is going to be in the top, top 5, top 3, or whatever it is, and that's got to be in my opinion, the quarterback, whether that's a Stroud or a Levis or that kind of thing, or if you want to sit and wait and take an Anthony Richardson if he comes out and maybe his draft stock goes up as well. I mean, we've seen it happen, Trey Lance and those kind of guys going higher than they should. And you just kind of never know what's going to be available. What I would really want them to avoid is taking a guy way too early just because he was there and they just thought, well, we won't get him, later on. I would rather them move up and get the guy that they really want instead of just waiting on a guy who may fit and he's maybe graded as a second rounder and we take him, within the top 10 and have it make no sense. It's kind of the situation I want to avoid.
And I think they will. I do think they will be aggressive. I just think the problem is that just so many of the teams, aren't there, like Carolina and who are awful and will fire their coach and maybe their GM at the end of the season. And one or two others who are so bad that it's going to be hard to get above them the more games you win. But then the schedule is challenging, isn't it, for Seattle? I mean, I think that's quite an interesting game against Arizona. It's Arizona next, isn't it? It's quite an interesting game, that, because I'm going to take my coat off. I'm too hot now. I've been home for a while. Arizona next is a very interesting game because that I could imagine that going either way. And it is in Seattle, isn't it? So I can... it could go either way. It feels a little bit like if they win that game and get to 3-3, they might carry that on all year, Adam, where they kind of just sort of win one, lose one, win a couple, lose one, end up with sort of 7 or 8 wins maybe, and that's how the season goes. But if they lose it, it could easily spiral a little bit. Then we could be looking at, I think after that they play the Chargers, don't they? The Giants, the Cardinals again. You've got tough opponents coming up off the back of that. It could start to drift a little bit.
Yeah, I think given that from the outset of the season, we've always discussed that we're going to try and address the situations of, how do we get better going forward? And I think the consensus amongst most sports fans in American sport, maybe in worldwide sport, is that the hardest thing to do is to get a quarterback. So you've got that as a problem, that we need to find a quarterback. Oh, and by the way, your defense is generationally awful. So, it's not that easy to be hugely positive given that situation, that not only do you have to go and find the hardest position in sport, but you've also got to sort out the entire other side of the ball, because that is performing at a potentially record low, and they're giving up points in different ways every week. It's not like there's a reason, like if we can just tweak that, then that might shore it up. It's all of it's bad. And it might be the case that the scheme, the Fangio scheme they're trying to bring in is bad and the coaching isn't up to it. I mean, that is a mess.
Might help if they wrap up a little bit, though.
Well, another thing,
right.
if it's not tackling, it's gaps, it's scheming, it's pass rush, it's covering. Trying to a bit of Schadenfreude with this, but I don't agree with what Rick said, that they do have to find a quarterback at some point, because otherwise you end up being just a nothing team. Like they do have to get I think, Rob, you've said this in your sort of videos in the week. They can't just keep punting on the fact that they got Geno Smith. They have to go and get a quarterback at some point. And so, I think it's quite clear we can say it till we're blue in the face that we want this team to be good. And being wrong with the Seahawks being good would be the most terrific thing in the world, because that means the Seahawks are good. But it's a bit deflating at the minute because an hour after the game, when you try and process what you've seen, you're thinking, "Oh, quite a lot wrong with that."
I think Pete Carroll's always wanted a complementary team, hasn't he? He wants the offense and the defense and the special teams to complement each other. And it's not even that the defense has to go from what it was seen today to elite defensive unit. It just needs to be able to, the offense is playing well enough that if you can just complement it, if you can just hold a team to 20 points rather than 40, then you will win football games. It's as simple as that. It's not that the defense needs to suddenly become a generational LOB style defense. It just needs to complement the offense and play off it a little bit more. And they are not. I mean, they're just getting the basics wrong on so many levels that's the problem. And it is going to be the thing that I think that frustrates me more than anything else as this year goes on. We don't need to get a quarterback now. We don't need to do it. And I don't want to just keep repeating myself, but I think people need to remember that Geno Smith is out of contract in the offseason. And if he keeps playing like this, there will be other teams interested in him. There may be other teams that are willing to pay a lot more. And to what point would you be willing to, do you really want to be paying Geno $20-30 million? Right now, it's kind of great, isn't it? It's a great story that he's playing well, he's on a cheap deal, and it's cool. When you suddenly start paying someone big money, if the performance doesn't match the money, then you get frustrated. Imagine if in a year's time he turns back into a pumpkin and you're paying him $30 million for next year, and you've whiffed on the quarter, you passed on the quarterbacks, and let's say Will Levis is playing great, CJ Stroud's playing great for someone else. Bryce Young's playing great for somebody else. Anthony Richardson's playing great for somebody else. And you're kind of sat there with Geno and his massive contracts and a couple of underperforming defenders and the unit's still crap. What's that going to be? We're all going to be sat there going, well, they blew the chance to use the Russell Wilson trade to get a replacement. And I think the minute that they traded Russell Wilson, they kind of committed themselves to drafting a quarterback next year. That had to have been the plan. And I'll keep insisting that your best bet, I think, in the next draft is to come out with one of those quarterbacks, because there's not just going to be an endless supply of great quarterbacks waiting for you 3-4 years down the line. You can have some really stinking quarterback classes. And it's tough. And because they haven't developed anybody over the last few years, there's no kind of person waiting in the wings there. And if you think Geno Smith's going to be an easy negotiation in the offseason, he won't be. I mentioned this in the blog. He signed 2 contracts with Seattle to be the backup after the draft, and 2 contracts in May, and towards the end of May. He has not been easy to retain, even as a backup. He's kind of waited it out, including this year when he was getting the only offer to start was in Seattle, and he still waited it out. And then they posted the contract, and they had to send it back and get it done again because the NFL rejected the terms of the contract and said it needed to be rewritten because there was a little thing with the incentives in there that the NFL didn't agree with. So he's never been an easy negotiation, Geno Smith, even as a cheap backup on a veteran minimum. He could walk into Pete Carroll's office right now and say, give me $30 million a year. That's $20 million less than the quarterback you shift to Denver, who's playing like crap. And he would be well within his rights to do that, in my opinion, because that's what the market, he'd be well within his rights to ask for a bit more, frankly, the way he's playing. So let's not assume he's going to be an easy retain. And he is 32 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Geno. He is 32 tomorrow. You need, even if you keep Geno, I'd like to have one in the chamber, as John Schneider may say. Just because there needs to be some sort of development there, doesn't there, Robbie?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the idea of paying someone like Geno Smith $30 million when you could have a quarterback on a rookie contract and then use that money on the defensive line or a linebacker or someone else, poach someone that's playing well off a different team is a better idea, in my opinion, than paying Geno 30 and still drafting a quarterback and then hoping that you can fill holes everywhere with the rest of your picks or cheaper free agents. I would rather, use some of that money and get a high-end quality defensive player that could come in and be a game wrecker and help this defense out a lot, and hope that and put your hope into that rookie quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think of the way it is, and I'll keep saying it. I think the key to this is to get that rookie quarterback. Even if Geno stays next year, it could be a redshirt year for the quarterback. Worked very well with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes, incidentally. I think I'd like to see something like that in Seattle if it's possible. And then you have to put together the complementary defense. Complementary. Doesn't have to. The Seahawks don't need a top 5, top 10 defense. They can be 15th. Just don't be 32nd or 31st, because Detroit may be 32nd. That's it. Don't be giving 60-yard runs to Taysom Hill when you're defending a 1-point lead. That's it. And I maintain that while ever the defense continues to play this badly, we are right to challenge whether Pete Carroll is the right man for this job. And I'm sorry if it's doom and gloom. I'm sorry to Robbie's friend. And I'm sorry to anybody else. But frankly, I think one thing we will always do on here is talk about the things that need to be talked about. And I do listen to a lot, and it's not just a Seahawks thing. I listen to a lot of podcasts that kind of skirt around the issues or this. But I mean, let's be honest, there's every chance tomorrow when Pete Carroll's speaking to Seattle sports that he spends more time talking about the Seattle Mariners than he does about the Seahawks defense. There's every chance of that, isn't there? There'll be a good 5-6 minutes on the Mariners, frankly. And I'd like a nice deep dive, and I hate that phrase, but I've said it, into the defense and, minimal talk of the things we already know. Like Tyler Lockett's a freaking great player and Geno Smith's playing great. We know all that. Don't need to hear it. What I need to hear about is the defense. Do you have any final thoughts, Adam?
No, I think summed it up. And, there might be other on-the-minute podcasts that spend time, eulogizing about Jason Myers kicking a field goal, whoop-de-doo. But I don't think we've ever been anything but, brutally honest about what we think, and we call it like we see it. And hopefully enough people can see that this isn't a bit, all of this is particularly genuine. We're not staying up till midnight, just for a laugh, just to, play a character and be a fake Skip Bayless just to slag things off. We do care, and this stuff does matter. That's why we do it, and we love doing it, and that's why it's addictive. We're drawn back to doing it, but I certainly think we call it like we see it. Obviously, we will have our thoughts that may frame our overall views on a 50-50 call, but I'm pretty frustrated about the game today and how it seemed, because the least I expect is to see organized, clean football. And by the way, like the Penny thing really sucks. I'm really quite sad for him. I think Kenneth Walker looks like a really good prospect, but I went into this morning, the game today, thinking, if things break right, there's an outside chance of the playoffs if Penny can stay healthy and whatever, because I think he is that good and has that much potential to be a great player. I think the prospects took a real dive after the game today, which is why maybe I'm a bit more upset than otherwise would be after a normal loss.
Adam, what will get you over this is go and watch Bijan Robinson tape, because he's going to be Seattle's next first round pick. Robbie, any final thoughts, Robbie?
Well, you mentioned the Mariners. So being from Seattle, I'll go ahead and just pipe in. And for anybody who cares, I'm from Seattle. Mariners.
All right, Robbie Pete. Robbie Pete checking in.
Hey, come on. You guys talk about soccer, your football all the time, and I
get
lost.
True. Robbie, I have spent some time talking about England, so go ahead, Robbie.
Yes,
the floor is yours. For some Mariners
so I'm going to take my moment. It's been 21 years in the waiting, so I'm very excited about the Mariners and what a come from behind being down 8-1. So congratulations to them. But as far as the Seahawks go, I mean, I think we've all kind of just said it already, and we'll be back to keep talking about our thoughts, and some people are going to like it, some people are not. It's fine. We're here to talk about what we think is important, and we'll just keep talking about it and see. We'll look forward to the draft next season.
Yeah, I must admit, I watched the end of a baseball game on TV for the first time yesterday and the night before. I actually watched. I couldn't care less. I mean, no offense to any Mariners fans out there. It has no impact on my life. I do not follow baseball. I have no time in my life for another sport, especially one that lasts as long as baseball did, because I saw there was that 15-inning game between, was it Cleveland and Tampa Bay, I think it was. It was like 0-0, 0-0 until the 15th inning, and then I think Cleveland scored, and I was thinking, God, that must have took forever. It's like a 7-hour game. It was 0-0. And people complain about football over here. This is only an hour and a half, and it finishes 0-0. It does if you follow the teams that I watch anyway. Adams follows a slightly better team. But yes, congratulations to the Mariners. And I don't know much about baseball, but I know Houston are kind of a hated team, aren't they, in the league? Are they cheaters or something?
Very much so. Yeah.
Are they playing them next?
Houston. They are playing Houston. Yep.
Is it best of 5 or best of 7 now?
Best of 7 now.
Okay. Oh, is it? Okay. Right. Fine. Well, go. Are they called the Mariners or are they called the Ners?
The Mariners. Come on.
Okay. Go, man. I've only seen one Mariners game live, and they lost 10-0 to, funnily enough, the Toronto Blue Jays. So, go, Mariners. Good luck against Houston. Hopefully your defense is better than Seattle Seahawks defense. Anyway.
And my apologies. It is a 5. It is a best of 5. Sorry. Not out of 7.
Fake news, Robbie. Fake news.
I was testing to see if anybody got me on it, but no one said anything. So must be no Mariner fans or baseball fans on.
Cool. But listen. Thank you to everybody in the live chat, and thank you to everybody who's watching live, and thank you to everybody who has subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed, help us get those subscriptions up. Like the video as well. You can find Adam on the Pedestrian podcast, and we'll be back next week as well to pick through the bones of the Arizona game, and hopefully I might do a stream in the week as well. Sarah has got in right at the end with a super chat, so come into it. Dan Quinn learned you have to play more man in the new NFL with more RPOs and misdirection. Why hasn't Pete Carrillo? I love the fact. I don't know if that's an intentional mistake or not. Maybe she knows somebody called Pete Carrillo and it just predictive texted that. But yes, Pete should have learned, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? It's not. They've tried to adapt, and look what's happened. Anyway, thank you for everybody who's watching. Thank you for the super chats. Please subscribe, like the video, SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more. This week, there'll be the quarterback review, although Will Levis and Bryce Young didn't play due to injury. Got some non-quarterback prospect talk coming up as well, and potentially a live stream in the week. Until next time, see you guys. Bye for now.